My older sister fought tooth and nail to become the legitimate daughter and was finally adopted by the first wife. But the first wife had a cold personality and only taught her accounting and household management, leaving her completely lost when it came to winning a man's heart. Meanwhile, I grew up beside a concubine, mastering music and dance, and became the most admired girl among the noble sons of the capital. My sister dreamed of the young duke day and night, but he fell deeply in love with me instead. Even his mother said during her visit that the difference between legitimate and illegitimate children meant nothing, as long as her son was happy. That's when my sister lost her mind and killed me. I never imagined that both she and I would be reborn, returning to the very day of our adoption years ago. This time, she hid behind father and said she didn't want to live with the first wife, volunteering instead to go with the concubine. I quickly stepped forward and embraced the first wife's leg, thinking that in this life, it was finally my turn to enjoy the good life. I am Elena Song, and my sister Vivien Song and I were both illegitimate daughters of concubine Mai in the Song manor. Because concubine Mai had passed away, we were to be given to other mistresses in the manor for upbringing. At this moment, my sister and I stood beside father, while opposite us was the main wife, Lady Chen. Father explained that these two girls had lost their mother and were very pitiful, suggesting she adopt one of them. He noted that he knew her health was poor and feared she couldn't care for both, adding that concubine Hua also had no children, so she could take the other one. Father hadn't finished speaking when my sister pulled at his sleeve and said she wanted to live with concubine Hua. Even father, who had always loved Vivien more than me, was surprised. He knew her proud nature and didn't expect her to give up the opportunity to become the legitimate daughter beside the first wife to willingly go to a mere concubine. Father asked if she was sure. Vivien continued, saying she had really thought it through and that he should let the first wife adopt her younger sister instead. After speaking, she hurriedly ran toward concubine Hua's courtyard as if afraid the matter wouldn't be settled. As she passed me, Vivien laughed softly and whispered for me to be the legitimate daughter in this life and suffer all the hardships. I knew exactly why Vivien said that. In her previous life, she had been determined to become the legitimate daughter and ran to the first wife first. However, after entering Lady Chen's courtyard, she realized how naive she had been. Although Lady Chen was the official wife, she didn't have father's favor at all. The whole courtyard was cold and deserted, and Lady Chen herself had no tricks to compete for favor. She basically didn't please father and didn't even try, spending her days chanting prayers in the Buddhist hall. Vivien, following Lady Chen, was disciplined very strictly. Before dawn even broke, she was woken by the older servants. After washing and changing clothes, she went to the academy for young ladies in the capital to study with the masters. Upon returning, she couldn't rest, as Lady Chen would personally supervise her learning to balance account books, studying hard until late at night. Vivien was unspeakably miserable. While she was dizzy with numbers, I followed concubine Hua to the theater to watch plays. When she practiced calligraphy until her hand hurt, concubine Hua took me on spring outings where I was even allowed to fly kites. It didn't stop there. When we were a little older, it was time for us to participate in gatherings for the young lords and ladies of the capital. I was carefully groomed by concubine Hua, from makeup to clothing. I knew how to sing and play the zither. The noble young lords were fascinated by me, calling me the #1 beauty of the capital. Meanwhile, no one paid attention to Vivien. She had no artistic talents, and the things Lady Chen taught her couldn't be used in these situations. However, Vivien still had the status of legitimate daughter. When discussing marriage, she had an advantage. Therefore, after Vivien fell for the young Duke of the Western Manor, she refused to eat or drink and knelt before Lady Chen, begging her mother to go to the Western Manor to propose for her. But Lady Chen didn't care about her plea. She only replied indifferently that she wasn't yet old enough and they would discuss it later. She added that being so crazily love-struck would surely cause disaster in the future and punished her by sending her to the Buddhist hall to copy the Heart Sutra 30 times. While Vivien was punished in the Buddhist hall copying scriptures, I continued to show off my talents at gatherings with the willow dance that concubine Hua had taught me. That graceful and charming appearance made many royal descendants and noble lords sigh with longing. It was said that on that day, people in the capital were overwhelmed by me. Even the young duke whom Vivien missed day and night was moved by that dance. By the time Vivien struggled to get out of the Buddhist hall, the marriage proposal for me from the Western Manor had been sent straight to the Song Manor. The person who came to propose was the mother of the young duke. She smiled gently and said she knew the second young lady was an illegitimate daughter raised by a concubine, but this wasn't important. She said she herself was also born to a concubine and didn't care about such distinctions. The most important thing was that her son liked me. At this moment, Vivien truly went mad. She carried a bucket of oil, rushed into my room, and set fire to everything. In that sea of flames, she and I died together. But we also were reborn together. In this life, Vivien unhesitatingly chose concubine Hua, dismissing the status of legitimate daughter as a mere joke. She told me to follow that damned old woman to suffer. It was true that Lady Chen's place was a bit hard. My father favored his concubines over his wife, a fact the whole capital knew. It was just that in our previous lives, we were young and didn't realize it. Stepping into Lady Chen's room, I felt like it was an ice cave. There were no decorations at all. Aside from tables, chairs, and utensils, there was only a Buddha statue and an incense burner. Lady Chen closed her eyes to worship Buddha amidst the faint smoke of sandalwood. She asked me if I was very disappointed. In the previous life, with my sister's personality, she must have clearly shown the word disappointed on her face when entering the room. Who would have thought that the dignified mistress of the house, after falling out of favor, would have furnishings in her room that were inferior to those of a concubine? Concubine Hua's room was gilded with gold and inlaid with jade, luxurious and showy. I just calmly added a piece of wood to the burner and noted that seeing the simple room made one's heart brighter. After all, no amount of gold, silver, or jewelry could compare to the sunlight. At that moment, the sunlight was quietly shining on the floor of the room. Lady Chen raised her eyebrows slightly. She turned her head to look at me, a flash of surprise in her eyes. She didn't expect me to say such a thing. She calmly said that since I had followed her, she would teach me, but she was very strict and I might not like what she taught. I bowed respectfully and said that whatever the lady taught, Elena would learn. A pile of account books as high as a mountain was laid out before my eyes, along with an abacus placed on the table. Lady Chen held a ruler and instructed me to concentrate, warning that if I lost focus more than 3 times, she would tap my palm. Learning to balance account books was indeed extremely dry work, unable to compare with poetry and songs. The numbers made one's head ache endlessly. Calculating income and expenses clearly was already difficult, let alone analyzing each item. Sometimes I would get sleepy. At those times, Lady Chen would lightly tap the ruler on my palm. In truth, she didn't hit hard, but it startled me. Lady Chen withdrew the ruler and asked in a low voice if it was very hard. I shook my head, but after thinking for a moment, I nodded and admitted it was very hard. Lady Chen's eyes darkened. I continued, saying that I knew if I didn't learn these things, when I married into another family as a mistress, anyone could rely on my lack of understanding to bully and deceive me. I said that by then, it would certainly be even more miserable. I added that people all have to suffer, and I would rather suffer from learning than suffer from ignorance. Lady Chen raised her eyebrows slightly. In fact, Lady Chen was very beautiful. Just a glance was enough to imagine her delicate beauty in her younger days. It was just that now she usually wore blue clothes and prayed to Buddha every day, so she always carried a sorrowful air. Actually, I liked her very much. Although she was always cold toward me, whenever the weather turned cold with the changing seasons, she would quietly come to cover me with a blanket in the middle of the night and then quietly leave. But my father didn't like her. Usually, he rarely came to this courtyard. That afternoon, father finally came. Every month, he would come to Lady Chen's place once to save face for his lawful wife. On that day, the servants in the courtyard were all happily busy, and the atmosphere was much livelier than usual. Unexpectedly, before father had even sat for half an hour, singing drifted in from outside the courtyard. The lyrics described a beauty with hair like clouds and a lotus flower behind her ear. Father couldn't help but ask who was singing. A servant replied that concubine Hua was teaching Miss Vivien to sing. A moment later, concubine Hua entered, bringing a wave of fragrance with her. She was beautifully made up, and Vivien followed her, looking equally magnificent. She asked Master Song if he had heard Vivien sing, asking if it was even better than she had been in the past. My father's expression softened considerably as he remembered that year when he met her for the first time at the pavilion, also singing this song. Concubine Hua shyly said she didn't expect Master Song to still remember. She added that her voice couldn't compare to those years, but luckily she could pass it on to her daughter. She told Vivien to invite her father into the room to sing for him once more. Vivien immediately and obediently stepped forward, pulling at father's sleeve. She said that she and the concubine both missed him, and they had prepared tea, cakes, and fruit in their courtyard. She asked him to eat while listening to her sing. She and concubine Hua, one on the left and one on the right, smiled like flowers. In just a moment, father was led away. Lady Chen's room was left in silence. The maids couldn't help but look disappointed, muttering that the master only came once a month, yet was still taken away. They asked the mistress if the dishes should still be served. There were many dishes tonight. The kitchen staff knew the master was coming, so they had intentionally prepared a spread. Before Lady Chen could speak, I stood up abruptly. I demanded they bring the food up, asking why not. I said if my father didn't eat, then we would eat. I asked if it meant that if a man didn't come, we women weren't even allowed to eat rice. I ordered them to bring everything up. I asked if there was the 8 treasures braised duck dish, declaring it my favorite and that I could eat a large bowl all by myself. Hearing me speak, the maids became excited and began to distribute the food. The atmosphere in the room became lively again. Lady Chen looked at me for a long time, then gave a rare smile and called me a good girl, saying I was indeed a child who refused to accept loss. From then on, Lady Chen often ordered the kitchen to cook that 8 treasures braised duck dish. I ate countless bowls but didn't see father again. Almost every day he was at concubine Hua's place. Whatever delicious food or fun things came into the manor, he sent them to concubine Hua and Vivien first. Until one day, Vivien met me, laughing so hard her earrings shook. She asked if I saw that being the legitimate daughter meant nothing, saying that whoever holds father's heart enjoys the benefits. She claimed my father found me useless and that I would end up a discarded object just like Lady Chen. She expected to see a miserable, tearful look on my face. Unexpectedly, I replied indifferently, asking my sister if she had ever considered that only actresses sang those folk songs. I said that right now, concubine Hua might teach her to do that to snatch father's favor, but perhaps later she would make her endure even more. Vivien immediately changed her expression, but in just a moment, she burst out laughing, claiming I was just jealous and telling me to wait and see how much more I would have to suffer. After speaking, she turned and left. But in truth, I wasn't deceiving her. In my previous life, concubine Hua had treated me the same way. She taught me to sing and dance so I could perform all sorts of talents for father. At that time, there were only Lady Chen and concubine Hua in the manor. And since Lady Chen wasn't favored, concubine Hua only needed to rely on these things to keep father with her. However, later on, father took in new young and beautiful women, so these tricks no longer worked. Concubine Hua then escalated her methods. She gave me medicine that made me vomit and become weak. She even applied oil to the floor where I practiced dancing, intentionally causing me to get injured. Waiting until I was hurt, she would run to my father, pretending to be heartbroken and crying, begging him to visit me for a moment, using this method to keep him. Those years were like a nightmare in my life. Thanks to concubine Hua, I was able to see one thing clearly. If one depends on the pampering of a man, one must fight with other women for a lifetime. And once one fights, there will come a day when one loses. As for Lady Chen, she didn't fight, so she never lost. In this cold, empty room, managers of farms and shopkeepers of stores came and went, all respectful to her, not daring to be the least bit negligent. The maids, older female servants, page boys, and family guards were even more orderly, loyal, and devoted to her. Living this life again, I wanted to become a mistress like that. Just like that, Vivien continued to follow concubine Hua to learn singing and dancing to please men. As for me, besides following Lady Chen to learn how to manage account books and run the household, I made a new request. I told Lady Chen I wanted to learn the sword. Lady Chen was stunned. It was true that there was a precious sword in her room. From the scattered words of the servants, I had pieced together her past. She used to be a female general. At 15, she had wielded a precious sword and rushed onto the battlefield to deliver a message for her father and brother who were besieged in the city. Unexpectedly, after her father died in battle and her brother married, they hurriedly forced her to marry a 5th-ranked civil official, who was my father. Her sad past was covered in wind and frost, and the precious sword quietly gathered dust, lying silently in the corner of the room. In the previous life, Vivien was very afraid of that sword, but I felt as if it were calling to me. I asked the mistress to teach me sword fighting. I looked at her. She showed no expression. I felt even more anxious, not knowing if this precious sword was a symbol of glory or pain for her. A long time later, Lady Chen coldly turned around, leaving me only a view of her back. Just as I was disappointed, thinking it was a refusal, she dropped a sentence from afar, telling me to go to the courtyard and show her my stance. From that day on, I followed Lady Chen to practice the sword. In winter, I practiced in the bitter cold. In summer, I trained under the scorching sun. Seasons passed, and in a flash, I had become a grown young lady. That day, I was practicing by the lake. The sword flew up and spun around several peach branches. In an instant, all the flower stems fell simultaneously, leaving only clean cuts. I knew I had succeeded. Suddenly, the sound of applause rang out from behind. I hurriedly turned my head and realized that at some point, a group of people had arrived behind the rockery. It was a group of young lords and ladies out for a spring outing, and among them was my sister, Vivien. It must be said that Vivien was truly the most outstanding among the noble young ladies present. Today she wore a peach-pink silk dress, looking even more beautiful than the peach blossoms. The young lords were all surrounding her, constantly trying to curry favor with her. This was something she had never experienced in her previous life. Yet while she was still indulging in the attention, those young lords saw the scene of me dancing with the sword by the lake. The leading young lord exclaimed, comparing me to the legendary Lady Gongsun, saying that a slight movement of her sword shook the surroundings and that meeting me today was even better than the legends of old. As soon as he said that, the other young lords hurriedly agreed. No one paid attention to Vivien anymore. Vivien looked at me, her eyes dark, her gaze as deep as a pool of water. That day, after I returned from sword practice and had just washed up, I heard a commotion outside the door. Someone shouted that Miss Vivien's hairpin was missing and ordered a thorough search. I wiped my wet hair and stepped out, bumping right into Vivien, who was leading a group of maids and older servants. I coldly asked what she was going crazy about now. Vivien glanced at me and then spoke to the people around her, saying she knew for sure Sister Elena would not steal her things, but to avoid suspicion, she had to search my room. The older servants were ordered to rush into my room. They turned everything upside down. A moment later, someone ran out holding a hairpin, announcing that it had been found in the second Mrs. Jewelry box. At that precise moment, my father had just returned from outside and, hearing the commotion, came over to see what was happening. Upon seeing him, Vivien immediately cried loudly. She sobbed that she knew I was jealous because she and the concubine were loved by father and had good food and clothes, but I couldn't steal her hairpin as it was a family heirloom of the concubine. She said that today when concubine Hua found out she had lost this hairpin, she was so angry she fainted and was still unconscious in her room. She begged father to seek justice for the concubine. In the ancestral hall, several guards were holding me down tightly. My father sat in the main seat with concubine Hua and Vivien beside him, still crying resentfully. I didn't know why, but seeing the two of them crying exactly alike, as if cast from the same mold, I felt amused. So I actually couldn't help but laugh out loud. My father flew into a rage, asking if I could still laugh and demanding how I could laugh after stealing. He declared that having a daughter like me was truly a corruption of the family style and that he would beat me to death today. I looked up at the man who shared my blood. There was no need to doubt. He really dared to beat me to death. The Song family couldn't beat a legitimate daughter to death, but after all, I wasn't born of Lady Chen. My biological mother was just a chambermaid. Moreover, Lady Chen was usually very cold to me. Everyone assumed that she and I had no affection for each other. Concubine Hua clutched her chest and sobbed. She told Master Song that he knew this hairpin was a relic her mother had left her, an item from the palace of the previous dynasty, a rare and precious object. She said that actually, no matter how precious it was, if Miss Elena liked it, she would certainly offer it with both hands. But she asked why I had to steal it. She worried that if word got out, the reputation of the Song family daughters would be severely affected, and asked what would become of Vivien's marriage. After speaking, concubine Hua looked like she wanted to faint again. Vivien hurriedly supported her. My father stared at me. A long while later, he coldly ordered the servants to bring out the family law instruments. According to family law, the crime of theft was punishable by 30 strokes. Taking just one blow would tear skin and flesh. 3 blows, and even if one didn't die, one would be crippled for the rest of one's life. At that moment, hanging by a thread, a voice, both cold and clear, suddenly rang out from the doorway, asking to see who dared. Lady Chen entered. Usually, she went to sleep very early. She should have been asleep by now. I didn't expect her to come. Lady Chen walked over to my side and looked coldly and directly at my father. She told the master that even government courts judge with reason and sentiment, and one couldn't favor one side and directly use punishment. My father's face turned pale. Concubine Hua cried out again, asking if the matter wasn't already clear, as the stolen goods were found in Miss Elena's room. She asked if Lady Chen wanted to cover up for me just because she raised me. Concubine Hua wasn't afraid of Lady Chen. Over the years, my father had favored his concubines and suppressed his wife to the point where concubine Hua always felt she was the most noble woman in this manner. She saw Lady Chen as merely a nominal mistress sitting in a corner, unloved by her husband. So she wasn't afraid even in a direct confrontation. However, the usually indifferent and quiet Lady Chen suddenly turned her head to look at concubine Hua. In that moment, she exuded a solemn aura that no one could match. She ordered her to kneel down. Concubine Hua was stunned. Lady Chen emphasized every word, calling her a concubine who didn't know her place and ordering her to take her daughter and kneel down before her. Concubine Hua looked at my father with pleading eyes. Unexpectedly, my father didn't say half a word. He even turned pale, looking behind Lady Chen. There, more than a dozen tall and strong men stood. They didn't enter the room but stood silently outside like sturdy iron pillars. They were a group of private soldiers, part of Lady Chen's dowry from the general's manor. I met them very often. Usually, I always thought they were just ordinary servants, calling them Uncle Li or Uncle Zhong, and they would laugh and give me sesame candy. But now they were all wearing armor. They stood silently, each a warrior who had followed the old general into battle and bathed in the blood of enemies. At this moment, both my father's hands and voice were trembling. He told concubine Hua that when the mistress spoke, she dared to talk back, which was truly disrespectful. He ordered her to hurry up and kneel down to apologize. Concubine Hua couldn't believe it and looked at my father. My father repeated the order to kneel. Concubine Hua was shaking with fear. Only then did she pull Vivien down to kneel with her. But concubine Hua had not yet given up. She handed the hairpin to Lady Chen and started to complain about the evidence. She insisted that this object was truly found in Miss Elena's room, a relic left by her mother, an item from a concubine of the previous dynasty that couldn't be bought on the market anymore. Lady Chen took the hairpin and squinted to observe it carefully. Unexpectedly, in just a moment, she threw the hairpin onto the ground, asking what kind of tattered trash it was. The whole room immediately sank into silence. Everyone was stunned with fear. Concubine Hua had dominated the Song manor for over 10 years, and until now, no one had dared to throw her things away like that. Concubine Hua stared blankly at the hairpin thrown onto the ground, forgetting even to cry. Lady Chen looked coldly at my father. She asked him if he really thought the daughter of Joan Chen would need to steal such a thing. Seeing my father stammering and speechless, Lady Chen turned her head and instructed the older servant beside her, Nanny Wu, to bring her jewelry box here. Lady Chen rarely wore makeup or dressed up. Usually, she only wore a set of blue clothes, her jet black hair tied neatly with a wooden hairpin. Even I didn't know she still had a jewelry box. Nanny Wu very quickly led 2 page boys carrying a very large sandalwood box over. As soon as it was opened, the whole room was flooded with bright light. The concubine my father had married was a palace maid who had just been released from the palace, so she was very familiar with these kinds of jewelry. At this moment, she cried out in horror first. She exclaimed that this was emerald tribute from the western regions and that the jade mine had been exhausted decades ago. She said she had only ever seen a bracelet of such good quality at the old princess consort's place. There were also coral pearls. She said that just one of those beads could be exchanged for 10 gold bars, yet the mistress had a large necklace like that. Concubine Hua's face went stiff while Vivien stared foolishly at the jewelry box full of precious treasures. In her eyes, there was fear, confusion, and also resentment and hatred. In the previous life, she had stayed by Lady Chen's side for so many years, yet she never knew that in that cold ice cave-like room, so many treasures were hidden. Lady Chen didn't bother to pay attention to anyone. She turned and waved to me, telling me to come there and pick a few items. I was dazed and said yes. A moment later, I reacted and hurriedly waved my hands, saying these items were too precious and I couldn't accept them. Lady Chen chuckled softly. She asked if I dared not accept even a few pieces of jewelry. She said I was her daughter, and later on, all her things would be left to me. At that moment, the jealous gazes of everyone poured onto me. Vivien glared at me, her eyes almost bleeding. Concubine Hua's face was pale, but she still tried to struggle for the last time. She said she knew Miss Elena grew up beside the mistress. She said Elena was the legitimate daughter, a golden branch and jade leaf, and even she was inferior to her. She said if the mistress wanted to protect Miss Elena, no one would dare to disobey. However, she asked if in the huge Song manor, the main mother and the legitimate daughter could just do whatever they pleased, while concubines and illegitimate daughters like them had no weight at all. Lady Chen looked at Concubine Hua and then laughed. When Lady Chen wore that cold, indifferent expression, Concubine Hua had never feared her. Yet at this moment, just a faint smile from Lady Chen made Concubine Hua tremble all over. Lady Chen stared at Concubine Hua, then she told Nanny Wu to bring her up. Nanny Wu understood and turned to go out. A moment later, 2 family guards escorted a disheveled maid in. Seeing this person, Vivien cried out involuntarily, calling the name Maple. Concubine Hua fiercely pinched Vivien once. Only then did Vivien swallow her words, but her body couldn't help trembling. She couldn't help but tremble because that maid named Maple was lying prone on the ground, her face covered in blood, her 10 fingers clamped by wooden boards, flesh and blood mixed together. The female relatives in the room all screamed in fear, and everyone hurriedly looked in another direction. Only Lady Chen remained as calm as usual. She explained that in the afternoon, Nanny Wu saw this maid running wildly everywhere in the courtyard, intentionally causing a disturbance to lure the person on duty elsewhere. After that, she appeared in the room. When she came out, she was seen by the family guards, and her expression immediately became panicked. Lady Chen said she felt something was wrong, so she took her away first to interrogate her on behalf of the master. She said this was the recorded confession. Maple had signed and fingerprinted it, and the master could look it over. Lady Chen waved her hand slightly, and Nanny Wu immediately presented a confession with a fingerprint to my father. It seemed Lady Chen had predicted the defense of Concubine Hua's group, so she silently blocked every retreat to avoid anyone saying she used torture to force a confession. During the interrogation, she had intentionally used the status of the main mother of the Song family to invite the elders of the clan to witness. They could all testify that every sentence and word this maid spoke was the truth. My father held Maple's confession in one hand, his other hand trembling incessantly. He absolutely didn't expect Lady Chen to be so formidable. Ever since this woman married into the Song manor, her quiet nature had bored him, making it impossible for him to pamper her. She herself also liked to live alone in a corner, spending all day in the inner hall practicing Buddhism. But at this moment, he realized this woman was the type who acted in the shadows. She saw everything clearly and caught the culprit as easily as turning over her hand. She waited for the storm to rise when she had already finished the investigation. Then she remained calm and silent, waiting for the opponent to make the first move. Now that the matter had caused such a huge disturbance, and even the clan elders of the Song family had been invited to witness the interrogation, even if he wanted to protect Concubine Hua and Vivien, he was powerless. At this moment, Maple was so frightened that she continuously kowtowed heavily. She begged the master to spare her life, saying it was Miss Vivien and concubine Hua who ordered her. She said they told her that after succeeding, they would give her 300 taels of silver. My father's face turned pale. He lowered his head to look at concubine Hua and Vivien kneeling on the ground. Vivien was frightened into shrinking into a ball like a quail. Concubine Hua, after all, was more experienced than her. At this moment, with tears in her eyes, she looked at my father, using a pitiful appearance to gain his sympathy. She said she had served him for over 10 years and begged him to save her. Lady Chen cut off concubine Hua's words. She walked up to my father and said she would ask the master just one question. She stated that theft was a serious crime punishable by 30 strokes according to family law. So what about the crime of framing and blaming others? My father looked at concubine Hua, who was crying to the point of fainting, and then looked at Lady Chen. He was silent. In that silence was a kind of mourning. Finally, he whispered to Lady Chen that the mother and daughter had indeed done wrong, but it didn't amount to framing and blaming. As soon as these words were spoken, even the servants couldn't stand to look anymore. My father favored his concubines over his wife. His bias had reached an unforgivable level. I was falsely accused of stealing, and before it was investigated clearly, he wanted to use family law to punish me. Concubine Hua and Vivien intentionally harmed me, and the evidence was clear, yet he intended to let it pass gently. Everyone revealed angry expressions. Only Lady Chen's face remained as calm as water. She asked if the master thought so. Without waiting for my father to reply, Lady Chen lifted her skirt, turned around, and supported herself on Nanny Wu's hand to walk out. She said she originally thought family scandals should not be spread outside, so she relied on the master to handle it fairly. She said the master was so busy with official duties that his head was dizzy, so he couldn't think of a way to handle this matter satisfactorily. She said if that was the case, then report it to the officials. The words were not yet finished when my father's face turned white. He shouted loudly to stop the lady. The servants in the Song Manor rushed forward like a disturbed beehive, wanting to block Lady Chen's path. However, Lady Chen just slightly lifted her eyelids. More than a dozen family guards immediately stepped forward to protect her in the center. They were former subordinates of the old general. They only recognized the mistress, not the master. The ordinary servants, facing these family guards who were as tall and strong as iron towers, were all frightened out of their wits and involuntarily made way. Seeing that Lady Chen was about to leave the courtyard, my father finally ran out of options. He covered his face, groaned, and ordered men to drag the woman of the Hua clan and that unfilial daughter down to beat them. That night, the moon was high and the wind was cool. I sat in the courtyard peeling chestnuts with Lady Chen. From the courtyard far away came the miserable screams of concubine Hua and Vivien. Lady Chen rubbed her hands and said I was probably secretly laughing at her. She said she clearly had the ability, but over the past few years, she had neither fought nor struggled, living so sullenly like that. I put the peeled chestnuts into a white porcelain plate and said that the mistress didn't fight because my father wasn't worth her fighting for. I was silent for a moment and then continued, saying that however, if one loved someone, one should still fight a little. The mistress immediately stopped her hands. The night was cold and the moonlight was gentle. A long time later, I heard her sigh softly and ask if I knew. Correct, I knew. In recent years, every time I followed Lady Chen to the temple in the suburbs to offer incense, I met a monk. That monk always wore a slightly old blue robe, and his face was as handsome as a landscape painting. People called him Master Qing. Some said Master Qing used to be the most outstanding young general in the capital. In those years, he wore a white cloak and silver armor, looking extremely imposing. He and Lady Chen were childhood sweethearts. That precious sword was the betrothal token he gave to Lady Chen, saying, "Joan, wait for me to return, and I will marry you." Yet on that expedition, 100,000 soldiers were buried in the western regions, and the young general never returned. Lady Chen had once thought of dying with him. Unexpectedly, things didn't work out, and she married someone else, but from then on, she was like a piece of rotting wood, her heart like dead ashes. 10 years later, that general returned. He crawled back from the deepest hell, using his last breath just to see the girl he missed day and night. Yet that girl had already boarded the bridal sedan chair to follow another. The general didn't want to disturb her. He decided to go to the temple in the suburbs to convert, taking the Dharma named Qing. All these things were just rumors. I once saw with my own eyes Lady Chen and Master Qing meeting in the temple. The two of them bowed from afar, like the bright moon above the mountains, with neither entanglement nor regret. They were like two travelers passing each other. If one had not heard those rumors, no one would realize they had once known each other. Only once, Lady Chen had a high fever that wouldn't break. She drank bowl after bowl of medicine, but her condition didn't improve. My father was at concubine Hua's place. The little maid went to invite him several times, but each time was blocked by concubine Hua's people. Nanny Wu was sweating profusely. She held the mistress's hand and asked if she could call him. Call him. I stood to one side holding the medicine bowl. It seemed that in just a split second, I understood who I had to go call. I silently handed the medicine bowl to Nanny Wu, then rode the fastest horse, rushing into the night, running straight to the temple in the suburbs. Master Qing arrived. He didn't enter Lady Chen's room but only stayed in the Buddhist hall next door, chanting all night long. Hearing the sound of the chanting, Lady Chen gradually got better. Although separated by a wall, she knew that person was beside her. There was no need to meet. Naturally, the gentle moonlight shone on both of them. At this moment, under the bright moonlight, I held Lady Chen's hand and said that there were some things she thought were too late, but in reality, there was still time. Concubine Hua and Vivien were released after 1 month of confinement. My father was excessively biased. He said each person was to be beaten 30 strokes, but in reality, every stroke was light. At that time, concubine Hua and Vivien screamed miserably, but the result was that they were completely healed in less than half a month. When she met me, Vivien smiled as brightly as the sun. She said, "So what if I had that old woman as a backer?" She told me to look and see that the one who ultimately had the voice in the family was still the man. She said in this manner, no one could be higher than father. The news reached Lady Chen's ears. At that time, she was sitting by the window trimming flowers. Hearing Nanny Wu report, she raised her eyebrows slightly, said nothing, and just reached out to cut off the most brilliantly blooming branch. After gazing for a while at the vase that had been arranged, she turned to tell Nanny Wu to throw it away, saying she didn't want the whole vase anymore. Nanny Wu responded with a yes, leading the little maids to carry the vase out, the corners of her eyes carrying a smile. We all understood that for the past few years, Lady Chen had not dealt with concubine Hua because my father wasn't worthy of her taking action. Now she didn't even want to keep my father anymore. The days that followed passed very peacefully. Lady Chen began to teach me more. She took me to inspect the farms and shops so I could learn with my own eyes how she managed that enormous property. During the inspection process, I was surprised to discover that these farms and shops all belonged to Lady Chen and had no connection to the Song Manor at all. This was extremely shocking because in our era, a woman's assets before marriage belonged to her father and brothers. And after marriage, even if she became a mistress, all income had to be entered into the common account books. The only property belonging to a woman was her dowry. Yet over the past 10 years or so, Lady Chen had expanded her dowry into such a magnificent estate. Seeing my face turn pale, Lady Chen just glanced at me and teased. She told me to look at my silly appearance. She asked if I really thought that for the past 10 years or so, she had only known how to chant Buddha's name and had not done any serious business. She said that as a woman, one must have at least one of two things, love or money. She said she no longer had love, so if she didn't earn a little more money, wouldn't she truly become a piece of trash? I nodded, agreeing profusely. At this moment, I was also very surprised to realize that it seemed Lady Chen had become much more lively. While I followed Lady Chen to learn how to do business, Vivien on the other side wasn't idle either. The crowd of dance teachers went in and out of concubine Hua's courtyard like a flowing waterfall, and the sound of flutes echoed endlessly. I knew Vivien was learning the willow dance. She became more beautiful, her skin as white as snow, her appearance like a flower. Years of learning dance made her figure graceful and lithe. Whenever we participated in gatherings for the young lords and ladies in the capital, the young lords would profusely praise her, calling her the #1 beauty of the capital. They had once been attracted by my swordsmanship, But they quickly realized my personality was stiff and unapproachable, and I was even less willing to dance with a sword for them to watch. Vivien wasn't like that. She had many talents. She knew how to sing, play the pipa, and perform all kinds of dances. The young lord sighed, saying Miss Vivien was truly perfect in both talent and beauty, wondering who would be lucky enough to have her. There were even people who compared me to her. They said we were both daughters of the Song Manor, but the second miss wasn't interesting at all and furthermore had no artistic talents. They said it was a waste for her to follow Lady Chen from childhood, as now she couldn't compare to the first miss in the slightest. Whenever this matter was mentioned, Vivien would reply that her younger sister also had talents, that she was very good at clicking the abacus, and that she would probably plan to be a shopkeeper in the future. After speaking, she and the crowd of young lords and ladies around her laughed at me together. Before long, the gathering for the children of officials in the capital was to be organized. Vivien began to act smug and triumphant in front of me. She said in the previous life she had to copy scriptures in the Buddhist hall while I was at the elegant gathering dancing and singing, making the young lords fall in love at first sight. But she said, "Little sister, in this life the one dancing the willow dance is me. So what will you use to compete with me?" I wasn't angry at all, just lowering my head to continue flicking the abacus beads. I told my sister that for the sake of our sisterhood, I would give her one last piece of advice. Do not dance the willow dance. Vivien lifted her chin and sneered, saying surely I was afraid. She left complacently. As for me, I just silently shrugged my shoulders. I had already reminded her, but she didn't listen, so whatever happened had nothing to do with me anymore. On the day the gathering was held in the water pavilion, the young lords and ladies were sitting and chatting. The young Duke of the Western Manor, Adrien West, was also sitting there. He wore ordinary black clothes, his face so handsome that others couldn't take their eyes off him. But his person carried a dangerous aura that couldn't be hidden. Those who feared him called him the King of Hell, while those who liked him only wished to offer everything just to exchange for a smile from him. Naturally, my sister Vivien obviously belonged to the latter group. The gathering had been going on for half the time when the sound of a flute suddenly rang out. Vivien, wearing a thin dress, appeared in the middle of the pavilion. Her lotus steps were graceful, her soft waist swaying, the thin silk fluttering over the lake surface. Everything created an extremely enchanting image. This was also concubine Hua's most formidable secret technique. She believed that as long as they saw this dance, all men in the world would be infatuated to death. Indeed, the young lords here were all captivated out of their minds. However, gradually, as the initial flutter of excitement faded, those young lords began to look at each other. Their eyes gradually turned into shock and finally turned into fear. Vivien paid no attention whatsoever and just kept dancing ceaselessly. Finally, she bowed slightly to end the dance and announced that this dance was called the Willow Dance. She thought what awaited her was applause and cheers thundering like thunder. However, the whole space was silent. Then the first young lord stood up, apologized, saying he had business and left first. Another young lord also stood up and chased after him, saying he would go with him. After that, the group of young lords all hurriedly left their seats. They crowded together as if afraid they would be left behind. Vivien stood dazedly on the spot. She didn't understand where she had gone wrong. Among the young lords, Adrien was the last to leave his seat. He remained silent for a long time, then stood up and walked toward Vivien. His expression was usually as cold as ice, yet now the corners of his eyes and brows were as gentle as water. Vivien felt her heart beating wildly, thinking the young duke was interested. Unexpectedly, in just the blink of an eye, Adrien walked past Vivien and stood behind her. He asked if we had ever met before. Adrien didn't remember the events of the previous life. He only felt a bit familiar with me. But just that was enough to scare Vivien, especially since she didn't know why that willow dance didn't achieve the predicted effect. As soon as I returned to the Song Manor, I was held back by her. She screamed, asking if it was me, if I had tampered with something or said something beforehand. She asked if I had secretly practiced the willow dance behind her back and had already danced for him to see. She wanted to rush over and tear me apart. Unexpectedly, the door to the room was suddenly kicked open by someone. My father led a team of family guards in. He trembled, pointing at Vivien, and ordered them to tie that unfilial child up for him. Vivien was pinned down by the family guards. She struggled desperately, crying and asking father what she had done wrong. My father had pampered Vivien for over 10 years. This was the first time she had seen his expression so terrifying. He asked if she still dared to ask, asking what she had danced at the gathering. Vivien stammered, replying it was the willow dance. She had obsessively thought about the willow dance for 2 lifetimes, thinking that as long as she learned it, she could step onto the path of her dream love. But she didn't know that back when the previous dynasty fell, the founding emperor of our dynasty had once drunk wine, looked at the dancers in the hall, and lamented. He recited the poem about how merchants' daughters didn't know the hatred of a lost country, still singing songs of the fallen dynasty across the river. At that time, the dance those dancers performed was exactly the willow dance. From then on, that graceful, beautiful, and moving dance was considered the dance of a lost nation. Actually, girls in brothels could still dance the willow dance. After all, that emperor only spoke while drunk, and the imperial court never issued an order banning that dance. But Vivien was the daughter of an official. Her actions were connected to the attitude and face of the entire clan. 1,000 gold miss of the Song Manor should have been discussing poetry and literature at the gathering, yet she unexpectedly danced the willow dance in front of everyone. Usually it might be overlooked, but currently the nation was in turmoil with wars on all 4 sides. Even if my father pampered her to the extreme, he couldn't save her this time. Vivien was locked in the ancestral hall for 7 days and 7 nights. When I went to visit, she was so haggard she was just skin and bones. Her eyes, once as clear as autumn pools, were now swollen shut. She didn't see me, so she just kept whimpering to the void, telling them to go tell father that he had blamed her wrongly. She claimed the dance was taught to her by concubine Hua, asking how concubine Hua could not know if there was a problem. I walked in and whispered to her that perhaps concubine Hua really didn't know. I said she was just a dancer who came from a brothel, relying on her beauty and flattering tricks to be brought into the manor by father. I said that no matter how favored she was just a concubine in the manor and had never stepped foot outside. After all, a concubine's vision is limited. Or perhaps actually concubine Hua did know, but she needed to gamble this time. Over the years, she had done some shady things outside under the name of the Song Manor, and now her debts were piling up. She knew if the matter was exposed, father wouldn't forgive her. Therefore, she wanted my sister to marry into a high and wealthy house to become a new backer for her. Vivien stared blankly at me for a long time. Then she shook her head while muttering that it wasn't right. She said clearly in the previous life I also danced it, so why was I noticed by Adrien when I danced the willow dance? I looked at her with a pitiful expression. Then I articulated each word, asking my sister if she had ever thought that Adrien loved me not because of that willow dance. I said in the previous life I didn't want to dance the willow dance. Although I was raised by concubine Hua, as long as there was a chance, I would go to the school to audit classes. I knew the stories related to the willow dance and knew that if I danced it, not only would I become a laughingstock for the entire capital, but I would also push the family into a dead end. But concubine Hua forced me. She grabbed my hand and said, "Elena, your father has taken in a new little concubine. This Song Manor is about to have no place for us to shelter anymore. Trust me, just dance this dance in front of those noble young lords, and there will definitely be someone willing to marry you. Whether as a main wife or a concubine, simply put, if I didn't dance that dance, we would only be able to live comfortably for a few more years." I still refused. Unexpectedly, concubine Hua tied up the little maid beside me and used their lives to threaten me. She asked if I wouldn't dance. She said fine, then living was useless for us anyway. She said she might as well beat these maids who had followed me for years to death, dragging them to die with us. I had to compromise, asking concubine Hua to release that little maid. And then I danced the willow dance at the gathering. When I danced this dance, Adrien was very disgusted with me. He determined I was someone willing to sell myself just to win favor from men. That was until he discovered that after finishing the dance, I didn't speak to any of the young lords there but went to the backyard alone. When Adrien ran over, I was writing a few words on the wall. Disliking the wind and dust of this life, the karma of former destiny has been exchanged. After writing these words, I hung up a white silk strip, intending to end this life full of despair. At that moment, Adrien realized that behind that willow dance was my unspeakable suffering and torment. He saved me. Afterwards, he helped me suppress the group of young lords and ladies present at the gathering that day. He used the power of the Western manner to force them not to mention the matter of me dancing the willow dance to the outside. To thank him, I gave him a sword tassel I made with my own hands. He returned the favor with a set of the 4 treasures of the study. Later, he took the sword with that tassel attached to the battlefield to kill enemies. I stayed in the rear, using the 4 treasures of the study to write of my longing for him. Finally, Adrien returned in victory, bringing the 3 letters and 6 etiquette to propose to me. In the marriage proposal, it was written, "I have lost my heart to you for a long time, willing to tie the knot with you for a lifetime." However, in the end, we couldn't tie the knot. In the previous life, when Adrien returned in victory, I remained only as charred bones because I had been engulfed in a sea of fire. That day, the young duke, victorious in 100 battles, staggered out of the Song Manor, his back so lonely it pierced people's hearts. Everyone knew his fiancée had died. Therefore, everyone came to the manor to comfort him, advising him to restrain his grief and incidentally introducing new people to him. Adrien chased them all away. Afterwards, he went alone to the temple in the suburbs. The temple had 3,000 steps. He took 1 step and prostrated once. He recited, "Flowers with her, flowers bloom. When the Lord of Spring decides, whose body will it be placed upon? If you must go, then go. Staying, you know how life will be. If flowers can fill your head, please do not ask where they go." At this point, speaking of this, Adrien burst into tears. He kowtowed toward the Buddha hall. He just kept bowing and begging them to save me, to let me live again. He kowtowed until his forehead was covered in blood, until a blue figure stood before him. The monk, missing 1 arm, looked at him with great pity and said, "The greatest suffering in the human world is lovesickness." "Fine, I will fulfill this for you." Adrien didn't tell me these things. It was Master Ching who told me. On the day Master Ching chanted all night for Lady Chen before leaving the Song Manor, he smiled and looked at me. He said, "Young lady, my suffering is separation. The one who begged for the young lady to be reborn, his suffering is death. Fortunately, today you two have the opportunity to meet again. You must cherish this destiny." Under the moonlight, Master Ching clasped his hands together at me. He himself couldn't obtain love but still wished that all sentient beings in this world could become couples. At this moment, I looked at Vivien, who was dazed there, and continued softly. I asked if she understood. I said my sister's singing and dancing talents could only win temporary favor, but love wasn't that simple. That thing needed harmony and understanding from 2 hearts. Perhaps he and I were connected by the willow dance, but his loving me had nothing to do with that dance. From start to finish, the ending would never change. He didn't love her, not for any other reason, but simply because she wasn't me. But I said I had to thank her. If not for her, I wouldn't have been adopted by Lady Chen, nor would I know the old story of Master Ching. So my happiness and peace in this life were all thanks to her merit. Vivien left. In the middle of the night, she escaped from the ancestral hall and entered concubine Hua's room, then strangled her tightly. I had thought that after 2 lifetimes, the person she hated most was me. In the end, I discovered that the person she truly hated most was concubine Hua. In the previous life, when the Western manor came to propose to me, concubine Hua ran to Lady Chen's courtyard to show off. She said she was more capable than Lady Chen, and even her daughter was more capable than Lady Chen's daughter. She claimed Elena danced the willow dance she taught, and the young duke fell in love at first sight. She said she wasn't boasting, but as long as one learned this dance, one could hold the hearts of all men in the world. Vivien heard those words and thought they were true. Thus, an obsession was born. In this life, wanting to learn this dance, she endured concubine who were exploiting and tormenting her from childhood to adulthood. Unexpectedly, in the end, it was all in vain. Vivien strangled concubine Hua, screaming until her voice was hoarse. Concubine Hua struggled desperately, refusing to show weakness and cursed back. She called Vivien good for nothing, saying she was useless and couldn't win a man's heart, and now dumped it all on her head. She said if she had adopted Miss Elena back then, she would now be marrying into a wealthy family and welcoming her to enjoy blessings together. While the two of them were struggling, they accidentally knocked over a lamp. The flames flared up fiercely and then gradually died down. Looking at the room that was once gilded with gold and jade, it was burned into a desolate ruin. Concubine Hua and Vivien were both buried within it. In just a few short months, father had people renovate that room. A new little concubine entered the manor and moved in. It was said that this concubine sang opera very well. She often triumphantly told people not to blame the master for pampering her so much. She said if anyone could sing the Peony Pavilion as perfectly as she did, they would grasp the hearts of men in the world. Well, the rotten matters of the Song Manor no longer had anything to do with me. 1 year later, Adrien and I officially got married. On the day of leaving the house, I wore a wedding dress and bowed to bid farewell to my parents. Lady Chen sat in the high position. At this moment, she should have said polite words such as I must serve my husband and be filial to my parents-in-law, but she said none of those things. She was silent for a long time. Finally, she just gently told me that Elena, I must live very happily. That was the thing she had not obtained in the first half of her life. After seeing me off, Lady Chen immediately placed a divorce letter in front of my father. My father was stunned with fear. After the shock came anger. He roared, asking if Joan was crazy, saying the Chen family would never agree to let her divorce. Lady Chen nodded, saying that was indeed the case, so she had already returned to the Chen family for a trip to sever relations with them. My father's eyes widened. He couldn't believe that a woman dared to divorce and also sever relations with her maternal family. Then how would she live in this world? A long time later, my father woke up. He pointed tremblingly at Lady Chen, saying he understood. He said she saw her daughter entering the Western Manor, so she thought she had a backer, right? Lady Chen looked at my father with confusion. She asked why she needed a backer. She said if speaking of assets, the property under her hand these past years was enough for her to spend for 8 lifetimes. She said the Song family and Chen family combined were not as rich as she was. As for safety, Lady Chen picked up the precious sword that had been forgotten in the corner of the room for nearly 20 years and drew it from its sheath. The blinding light immediately illuminated the room. She told the master that instead of worrying about her, he should worry about himself. Finally, Lady Chen left the Song Manor where she had lived for over 10 years. Lady Chen calculated her assets very clearly. She didn't covet anything in the Song Manor, and conversely, the Song Manor should not dream of touching her land and shops. My father was so angry he fell ill. By the time he recovered, the Song Manor had declined to the point where nothing was left. The mistress had left. This place only had a crowd of charming coquettish concubines remaining. Every one of them only knew how to spend money, not how to save money for the master. Telling them to fight for affection, each one had schemes. Telling them to manage account books, each one was blind. My father didn't know what to do, so he decided to take a second wife. But any decent family in the capital had heard of his glory in favoring concubines and destroying wives, so no one was willing to marry their daughter into the Song Manor to suffer grievances. My father had no other way but to go beg Lady Chen. He said, "Lady, before it was I who was wrong. I regret it. I don't want to divorce you. Let past matters go. Come back with me. From now on, you will always be the mistress of the Song Manor. No one can override you." Lady Chen leisurely took a sip of tea. A long time later, she splashed the remaining tea water onto my father's feet. She commented that the feng shui in this room wasn't good lately, asking why evil spirits kept entering. Lady Chen told Nanny Wu that whenever she was free, to invite a priest to perform a ritual. My father's face turned pale. He wanted to flare up, but before he could explode, he was invited out by Nanny Wu. After he left, Lady Chen looked toward the screen and said, "All right, come out." I walked out giggling. She glared at me, saying I was becoming more and more unruly. She said after all, that was my biological father. I didn't even want to meet him once, just hiding here watching him make a joke of himself. I didn't care. Whoever loved me was my family. That year, just because of a hairpin, he wanted to beat me to death. That kind of biological father, Whoever loves him can love him. I don't need him. So whenever it was the day to return to my maternal home, I went to find Lady Chen, never going to the Song Manor. Lady Chen's residence was still as simple and cold as when she was in the Song Manor. The room only had an incense burner and a Buddha statue, but now I had better eyes. I knew that inside that incense burner was sandalwood, even more expensive than gold. Lady Chen was a hidden rich woman. She was just too lazy to show it. It was precisely because of this that those without knowledge always mistook pearls for fish eyes. Lady Chen clasped her hands to offer incense before the Buddha statue. Then she told me to tell her about my affairs at the Western Manor. I, who was now the mistress of the Western Manor, immediately turned into a student being tested by a teacher. I dared not be negligent, bowing my head to report. I said since taking over the housework, the stores, houses, and fields had all been inventoried. The servants in the manor were managed in an orderly manner. Unruly servants were handled, punished lightly as a warning to others. At the same time, I received news that His Majesty was about to open trade with the western regions. So I used my dowry to prepare horses, tea, silk, and porcelain. I was also preparing to find a suitable location near the official road to open an inn. In the future, this income wouldn't be entered into the Western Manor's common accounts. It would all be my private capital. I considered my answer extremely perfect. Unexpectedly, Lady Chen asked who was asking me about those things. She looked at me. The space was quiet to the extreme. Lady Chen let out a sigh. She said she knew the things she taught me, I had learned very well. What she was uneasy about were the things she had never taught me. At this moment, I understood Lady Chen's meaning. I lowered my head, my face gradually turning red. I said my husband was very good to me. Being by his side, I was very happy every day. Finally, Lady Chen smiled with satisfaction. She once told me that as women, we must obtain one of the two things, money or love. Now it was my turn to come and tell her. Why don't we be greedier and snatch both of them? Lady Chen looked toward the window. There was a jade vase there with a branch of red plum blossoms blooming brilliantly inserted inside. Outside the window, night fell. The moonlight was like water. The monk wearing a grey robe and carrying a hoe brought the newly picked plum blossoms under the moonlight. That person bowed for a long time. Lady Chen also stood up to return the bow through the branch of red plum blossoms by the window. I looked into the distance, vaguely seeing the high-spirited young man and woman of those years. Wait for me to return in victory and I will marry you, Joan. Fine, but don't let me wait too long. Actually, waiting a little longer doesn't matter because no matter how the world changes, those who love each other will meet again. True happiness is never found in superficial charm or fighting for fleeting affection, but in the quiet power of self-worth. Elena's journey proves that choosing the difficult path of growth and independence is the ultimate victory. A woman who cultivates her mind shines brighter than any jewel. When you stand strong in your own values, you attract a love that cherishes your depth, not just your appearance. Like the winter plum blossoms, resilience is the most beautiful quality, ensuring that true soulmates will always meet again. Thank you for listening to this story on Lotus Tale Studios. If you enjoyed it, please support us with a like, comment, and subscribe. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss our next tale of love, rebirth, and triumph.